Right on. And again, man, thank you for joining me on this platform. Prison to Promise is the name of the platform. And what we try to do, man, is just highlight stories of people who've been formerly incarcerated to motivate other people who may be dealing with the criminal legal system and trying to help them find their way out of the darkness, man. So again, thank you. Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, it's a privilege to be on here. I look forward to our conversation and the impact that this is going to have.
Yeah, man. And speaking of the impact that this is going to have, I understand that your work has been quite impactful. I've been following you a little bit on LinkedIn, so I see some of the amazing things you're doing. And so, if you would, maybe just if you would introduce yourself and maybe share a little bit about your background for our listeners, that'd be a great way to kick this off.
Yeah, so my name is David Garlock. I am formerly incarcerated. My story mirrors the Menendez brothers a lot. My
Mm,
brother and I, we were sexually and physically abused. We were not abused by our parents. We were abused by a non-family member. This went on for 8 years. The abuse began with me when I was 11 years old. Towards the end of the abuse, it was more physical. This person that tried to kill me and my brother numerous times. And we made the rational decision to take the person's life. I was 19 when what happened. My brother was 22. 4 months later, we were arrested, and we were there in Alabama. And in Alabama, you know anything about the dirty South? They love to give out the death penalty. They love to give out life without parole. So here I am, potentially looking at the death penalty at 20 years old. So that first weekend, I was just crying myself to sleep because I didn't know what was going to happen. The detective took me over to the county jail on November 1st, 1999 for more questioning. I was put in an interrogation room for 7 hours. After that time, I had a lot of time to think about the abuse. I had time to think about the murder. I had time to think about everything that had happened to my brother and me. And I finally confessed. And that was this big weight taken off my chest because this was the first time I'd ever told anybody about the abuse.
mm,
First time I'd ever told anybody about the murder. And that was just such a freeing moment. But the thing that changed the whole trajectory of my life happened next. And it's when the detective was, I'm sitting in the front seat with him, handcuffed and shackled. I turned to him. I'm like, hey, am I going to get the death penalty or life without parole? And he turns to me and he's like, do you believe in God? I'm like, okay, am I going to get the death penalty or life without parole? And he turns to me, he's like, do you believe in God? I'm like, dude, am I going to get the death penalty or life without parole? And he's like, do you believe in God? And so finally I was like, yeah, I believe in God. And when I got back to the county jail, I asked for a Bible, and they only had a little New Testament Bible. And I grew up in the church. I knew what to say, how to say it, etc. And so I didn't go to Matthew. I didn't go to Romans or John. I went to Revelations. I went to the end of the book. I got to Revelations 3:20 that says, "Behold, I stand at the door and knock. If anyone opens the door and allows me to come in, I will come in and sup with him." And I just cried out to God. I'm like, God, I need you. I don't know what's going to happen. And that moment just changed the whole trajectory of my life. And I served 13 and a half of a 25-year sentence. I've been out over 12 years. In 2021, I received a pardon from Alabama for a murder charge. My
wow.
brother also received a pardon. So both of us have received pardons.
Mm,
And I mean, some of the work that I do is, I see on social media around the Menendez brothers
mhm.
about the need for them to be able to make parole, or with the recent stuff happening with their habeas petition. I mean, it would be amazing if that was granted and they were given a new trial, and
Right.
I use our story as an example of what their lives can look like when they are released.
Wow. Yo, man, that's heavy, just what you dropped on me. And I'm still just kind of processing it. But three things that really stood out for me. For first, I wanted to say thank you for sharing that piece of your story and being so transparent. But three things that stood out to me is one, that you found the capacity. I guess you were at your rope's end, and so this is when you found the capacity to surrender to your understanding of God, and so that, I guess, began to open some doors for you on some level. But also, what stood out for me is that you got pardoned after doing 13 years, and so that's just a powerful testament, man. But one of the things I want to ask, as I think about that is like, you eventually got out. And so what do you think were some of your biggest challenges when you first got out?
Well, what really helped me is Brian Stevenson and the Equal Justice Initiative. I got out of prison, went straight into their reentry program. So I didn't have to worry about housing. So they had already had a studio apartment set up for me.
Mhm.
But really the biggest thing for me was getting a job. Doing 13 and a half years, coming out and seeing that most of the applications were online is like, whoa, this is really weird. I'm used to like pounding the sidewalk, pounding the pavement and taking your resume. So it was really weird doing that. And then I applied to Burger King, denied. I applied to McDonald's, denied. I applied to Starbucks, denied. Everywhere I applied to, I was denied. It took me a month and a half to get my first job.
Mm.
And when you're going through Equal Justice Initiative's reentry program, you work for EJI too. So I was able to have some finances coming in during this time. But
When you
a
say
lot of
EJI, who is EJI for people that
Equal
are
Justice
listening?
Initiative.
All right.
So it's an organization that Brian Stevenson founded in 1989 that
Right.
does a lot of work around. They began doing their work around individuals who didn't commit their offenses. So one of their first exoneration was Walter McMillian,
Hmm.
who the book Just Mercy and the movie Just Mercy
Yeah.
is a lot about.
Okay.
And so here it is. It was a Friday. I go to this restaurant right down the street from Equal Justice Initiative. The restaurant's name is Irish Bread Pub. I walk in, it's at 11 a.m. I was like, hey, I'm looking for a waiter's position or a dishwasher's position. They're like, okay, we're hiring a dishwasher. I was like, cool. Can I fill out the application? So I fill out the application. They're like, can you interview now? I was like, yeah, let's do this. 45-minute interview. And remember, I checked that box that, have you ever been convicted of a felony? And I put, we'll discuss the interview. 45-minute interview. That question never came up. I'm thinking in the back of my head, man, this is the best place ever. They don't care. They're not worried about this. They're like, can you start at 4 o'clock? I was like, I'll be here at 3:30.
Right.
So I get there at 3:30, fill out all the paperwork, start working. I work from 4 p.m. to 2 a.m. Now, I'd been up since 5:30 that morning, so I'd almost been up 24 hours at this
Right.
point. And then I had a 45-minute walk home. That walk home was the best walk home that I had had since I've been out of prison because I had a job.
Right.
Yes, I was only making $7.50 an hour, but I had a job.
It was a start.
Exactly. Come in the next day, start working at 4 o'clock. 5:30, general manager's like, David, can I talk to you outside? I was like, yes, ma'am. So we go outside. She's like, hey, I see that you wrote that you have a felony. Can we talk about that? I was like, yes, ma'am. So I explained my story to her. She's like, sorry that happened to you, but you're fired. We have a company policy that says we can't have violent offenders working here.
I've experienced that before.
So imagine what that 45-minute walk home was like. Then I have to text everybody telling them I got fired. Later that week, I go to another restaurant, Jubilee Seafood. Oh, I'm interviewed by Bud Skinner, who's the owner of the restaurant.
Hmm.
He asked me a question. He's like, hey, I see you have a 13 and a half year gap in your resume. Can you tell me about it? So I'm at this point. Do I lie? Do I tell the truth? What do I do? So I told the truth. I told him my story. He's like, I've never hired somebody that's formerly incarcerated. But because you were open and honest, I'm gonna give you a job. I'm gonna start you off at $9 an hour as a dishwasher.
Hmm.
You can start tomorrow. I was a dishwasher for 3 days and got promoted.
Nice.
And I was there the whole time I was in Alabama before I transferred my parole to Pennsylvania. The kicker is after that, I walked by Irish Bread Pub going to EJI one day. Kitchen manager's outside smoking a cigarette. He calls me over. He's like, David, what's up? I was like, hey, like, do you want a job? Didn't I get? Oh, we don't have a company policy like that. That was just the general manager's issue. And so I share that because this is something I share everywhere I speak, because people that are formerly incarcerated, we don't only have to deal with company policies, we have to deal with individuals and their own biases and how they view somebody and an offense that we could have committed 25 years ago.
Yeah.
I mean, I just posted something on LinkedIn and Twitter about like what you were talking about, the pardon. I travel a lot for speaking. So I put in for a TSA pre-approved pass and I was denied. And I put in my parole, my pardon to show them that Alabama's forgiving me. But Saturday, I got paper saying that they are unable to say that I pose or don't pose a security threat. And I'm like, dude, if Alabama, who's probably the hardest place to get a pardon, doesn't
Right.
deem me as a security threat, why are you guys having an issue with this? And another thing too is like, okay, if you're having issues, why don't you call me? You got my number. Why
Right. Let's
don't you
talk.
send me an email to find more about what happened?
Yeah. Yeah. Those of us who have felony convictions, particularly those of us with violent felony convictions, it seems like we can never get from under the cloud of that conviction. There's always someone somewhere who's going to bring that up, and try to hold us to that. But,
But
go ahead. Go ahead.
you know what I was doing last week?
Talk about it.
I was on the stage at Vacation Bible School serving our children in the church I go to. Once I got my pardon, they approved me to start working with the kids. So I am a leader for the fourth and fifth graders when we have small groups. I'd say one of the most amazing compliments I've ever gotten was I got a Facebook Messenger message from one of a couple who has two daughters who
Mhm.
both were in my fourth and fifth grade class. They're now in youth group. And she sent me a message like 2 years ago. She's like, David, me and the girls were having a Bible study about mentors, some who their mentors were. And the youngest one said, Mr. David. And I'm like, what?
Yeah.
It's like me, somebody that went to prison for murder is this little kid's mentor.
Yeah.
That's the thing. So many people at church too. They're like, David, I forget that you went to prison. I forget that you
Yeah.
went to prison for murder
Yeah.
because I don't see who you were.
Right.
I see who you are today.
And that's what's most important, bruh. But a lot of people continue to hold us hostage to that. Who we were instead of who I am and who I'm becoming. But that other piece you just mentioned about the children really resonates with me too, because I find myself being given responsibility for the neighbors' kids and for other people's kids. And I treat those kids like they're my own. And it's like, yeah, I did something violent in the past, but that's in my past. That's not who I want it to be, and that's not who I am. So yeah, work with me and let's work together and make this a better place where we live.
I mean, that's why we do what we do. That's why we're having this conversation,
Yeah.
because it's really about education. Too many people read headlines or they
Yeah.
see this, that, whatever else, and that's really what they want to think like, oh, you're this worst
Mhm.
person. It's like when people would just look at me and say, okay, I went to prison for murder. Yes, I went to prison for murder. But at that point, we felt that was only way to escape. And so when people hear my story, when I'm able to talk to them, they kind of understand the mindset that my brother and I were in that point. And it doesn't justify what we did,
Mhm.
but they have a better understanding of why we did what we did. And it allows them to look at us. It's not like we just said, okay, we're going to go out and kill somebody.
And that's the image that people get, that, okay, these are just violent people and they can't be trusted. And anything that is of value is going to come missing when they're around. But yeah, people don't know the should I say, the intricacies of our cases, and they don't understand the backgrounds. All they know is the sensationalism, as you mentioned, like from headlines and from, news stories and all this about people with felony offenses. But you mentioned, David, you said it's all about education. And so can you talk a bit about how your own education has helped you turn a corner or advance in your own career, in your own life post incarceration?
Yeah, I mean, I had to go to while I was incarcerated when to really begin about education because the abuser caused me to drop out of school with a semester left my senior year. I was just thinking the other day that, I had football scholarships to Boise State, to Fresno State, to University of San Diego, Occidental, and some other smaller Division two schools in Southern California. But
Hmm.
all of that didn't come to anything because I was forced to drop out of school.
Right.
So here I am, 20 years old in the county jail. And I told myself, hey, I'm going to do the time instead of letting the time do me. So I was going to take advantage of anything that they had to better myself and to improve myself, even if I had to serve all 25 years. So I was able to get my GED in the county jail. But when I went to prison, they had a drafting program. And so I got a certificate in drafting. They had a theology course through the chapel. It was unaccredited, but I really wasn't worried about like credits or certificates, things like that. I just wanted to better myself. And
Self
so I got a
development.
yeah, and so I got a master's of theology. And so when I was released in 2013, actually when Brian Stevenson started working with my brother and me in 2008, he started telling me about Eastern University. So Eastern University is a Christian college outside of Philadelphia.
Hmm.
It's where Brian got his undergrad.
Okay.
So I had been in touch with them since 2008 about attending school. And so I walked into school January 14th, 2014. I walked in with 67 credits.
Oh, wow.
Because of the work that I did while I was in prison, I had
Hmm.
walked in as a second semester sophomore.
Right.
Um, it was a surreal experience, because I'd only been out of prison 9 months, and here I am on a college campus I'm 34 years old, sitting next to like 18-year-olds
Yeah.
that are just like
Uh,
straight out of high school. Here they are in college.
did you feel out of place at first being on the campus with these young people?
Not really, because I mean, I had really prepared myself for it. And I was going to just experience and enjoy college as an 18-year-old,
Yeah.
and so everything I could do, I was going to do. Now, the second week I was there at Eastern, they put my testimony in the paper because the dean wanted everybody to hear my story at one
Hmm.
the game of telephone because he didn't want like me to tell one person and five people later they come up and like, David, are you a serial killer that killed
Right.
25 people? How did you
Right.
only do 13 years in prison? How are you here?
Yeah.
And the day that that paper came out, I was like scared. I felt like I was butt booty naked. Like everybody's gonna know everything about me. And it was such a powerful experience,
Mm.
because there were some sexually abused that came up and told me about their abuse.
Yeah.
And they told me that they were empowered because I shared my story so openly. There were others who had family members that were getting ready to come out of prison, so I was able to help them with reentry plans. Others, were just coming up and talking about just how powerful my story was, and how it lined up with Psalms 41 through 3, talking about coming out of the miry pit, being cleaned off, and being set on the solid rock. And it was just so powerful. But that morning, I was so scared. I was like, what did I do? This is going to be horrible. But my whole time at Eastern was so incredible.
Mm.
I was always welcomed. I was never tokenized. I was never put on a pedestal like, oh, yes, look, we have this person that's formerly incarcerated here. And I mean, I lived on campus.
Right.
How many colleges and universities out there are going to allow somebody who went to prison for murder to live on campus?
Right. 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 So
And then
blessed.
I was also the mascot. I was Beaker.
Beaker. What is that now?
It's the mascot. I
Oh,
was
wow.
the Eastern Eagle.
So you actually wore the.
Yep.
Oh, wow. Amazing. But yo, your story in many ways, and I guess many of us who've gone to prison, our stories align on many levels. And I'm just thinking about the power of a story. And I'm thinking about how, like you, myself, as a young person, I had went through and survived sexual assaults and abuse as a young child. But as I began to heal and share that story with people and how that caused me, to make all these poor decisions, end up in prison, et cetera, et cetera. But as I start sharing about my healing journey, it's amazing how many other men, as you shared, have come to me and said, "Hey, man, I too was sexually assaulted as a child. Now I feel a bit more empowered because I heard your story, I read your story." And then, when people see us on campus, again, it's such a powerful testament, even to people who may or may not have been impacted by the criminal legal system, to see us making strides gives them, I think, confidence as well as maybe sometimes even permission to pursue their wildest dreams.
Yeah, and talking about what you were just talking about, I have an analogy that I use when I talk about trauma. You have somebody who has or is a scab, and you have somebody that is a scar. And the scab, if you bump that scab, the scab's going to come up.
Hmm.
It's going to bleed. It's going to be painful. But then another scab comes up. But what happens if that scab gets knocked off? It's the same cycle,
Right.
and that's a cycle of trauma. If
Hmm.
somebody doesn't go through a healing process, they're okay for a little bit. Something triggers them. They're back in that 8-year-old, 13-year-old, 15-year-old place where
Hmm.
that trauma, where that pain, where that hurt took place,
Hmm.
and they're stuck there until they can feel better about it.
Right.
That's the person that hasn't dealt with the trauma. Now, the person that has dealt with trauma and begun the healing process is like a score.
Hmm.
Or and you hit that score, is it going to bleed?
Right.
No. Is it gonna be painful? Now, if you hit it really hard, it might be painful.
Right.
But what you can do is you can look at that score and you remember, oh wow, I was 13 years old. I fell off my bike.
Hmm.
My grandma had to come pick me up, take me to the emergency room. There's a cute nurse's assistant there that I'll never forget. And
Yeah.
everything about it, I got 13 stitches, everything about it, we remember. Another thing that's amazing about the score is you can take that score and go to somebody who has a scab and let them know that healing is possible.
Yeah.
So what you and I are doing with our scars
Mhm.
is we're going and we're letting people who have scabs know that healing is possible.
Right. I used to have a scab, bro, but now it's a scar. I've healed. And you too can heal. And this is how I healed. How about checking out how I healed? It might work for you, or it might take you down a path that you can find your own healing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's dope, man. That's really dope, bro. So, how do you think your education, man, has helped you do the work that you're doing now?
I mean, when I got out of prison, my plan was I wanted to open up a home for kids and teens to get them off the streets.
Mhm.
But God had other plans, and I majored in urban studies, focusing on criminal justice and social welfare. And so the internships I applied for, I couldn't get because of my felony background. So a colleague of mine allowed me to do an internship with him. He was creating a reentry home in Chester, PA. And so that beginning to do that work really resonated with me. And I was like, okay, this is stuff I want to do. Then I started connecting with a lot of folks like Glenn Morton, Lewis Reed,
I know Glenn.
all kinds of folks on Twitter and other social media who
Yeah.
were involved in the criminal justice reform work.
Mhm.
And in 2017, I went through Just Leadership's emerging leadership program. 2019, I went through their leading with conviction cohort. Um, and really, those criminal justice classes, were challenging me. I was learning the book knowledge to go along with the lived experience knowledge,
Mhm.
which gave me such a holistic view of the system. And then I got a job working at a Christian reentry home in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. The population we worked with were people who have committed sexual offenses. And so people are always like, David, how did you do that work? You were sexually and physically abused. You took the person's life. Now you want to work with this population? And I always tell people, it's about grace. It's about mercy. It's about forgiveness. One of Brian Stevenson's famous quotes is, "You're not as bad as worse than you've ever done."
That's right.
If I want people to look at me differently for committing a murder, I have to look at everybody the same way.
That's right.
And in this work, I viewed it as restorative justice.
Mhm.
I was
Sure
able
is.
to help these men heal. I was able to help these men have a conversation because most of these men would never be able to talk to the person that they had harmed.
Mhm.
So I was able to be a victim by proxy and have conversations with them so they could begin the healing process. Not only asking forgiveness, but also forgiving themselves. And in this work, I learned so much. And I mean, one of the crazy things is people who've committed sexual offenses have the lowest rates of reoffending.
Mhm. Absolutely.
And second is murder,
Mhm.
and so in society deems people who committed sexual offense and people who committed murder as the monster,
Right.
like, oh, wow, you have to get away from them. They're the boogeyman.
Mhm.
But in all actuality, is that the case?
Yeah.
And then it also goes back to what we've already talked about too, as far as trauma. A
Mhm.
lot of these individuals have unhealed trauma,
Mhm.
and that unhealed trauma has caused them to act out and,
Mhm.
and do things that they're really sorry for now.
Yeah.
And so I always talk about that, the pipeline that sends more people to prison is the trauma to prison pipeline.
Yeah, man.
It's the unresolved trauma individuals have from throughout their childhood. If
Yeah.
that's not resolved, if
Yeah.
that's not worked on,
Yeah.
it's going to cause them to act out later.
I'm willing to bet you if you did a survey of adverse childhood experiences of many of the people who are incarcerated, you'd probably find numbers through the roof, you know?
So there's been data out there, and 90% of women score 4 or more on the ACEs
Mhm.
test, and 50 to 60% of men.
Wow.
I always tell people put asterisks there around the men
Mhm.
because with men things are underreported.
Right.
So
I was
yeah,
going to say it's probably even higher amongst men.
yeah,
Yeah. Because of the machismo and all of this other stuff. Men don't want to say that, yeah, I was victimized as a child and so on.
yeah.
But yeah, it's real. And that's what leads us to all this antisocial behavior, drugging and everything else, violence and thievery, et cetera, et cetera. I'm a preacher preaching to a preacher. But one of the things I wanted to ask you, man, is how do you take care of yourself psychologically, emotionally, even physically doing this kind of work?
Definitely counseling. That's definitely a key. I always tell people, that we have to normalize counseling. There's the stigma that only crazy people go see a counselor is jacked up.
Right.
One of the things I will never forget is I think it was the first week in my psychology class. My
Hmm.
professor's like, "Yo, I have a doctorate degree in psychology."
Hmm.
He's like, "I have my own practice. I am your professor." He's like, "Every other Thursday, my butt is on a couch talking to a counselor." And I'm just and just the way that he normalized counseling and it's
Hmm.
like not only the fact of what we go through, but also the vicarious trauma that we experience too.
So
You know,
heavy.
like going in and like if we go in and do work in a prison, what we see, what we hear. Working with the population that I did, working around people who've committed sexual offenses is
Yeah.
for at times hearing what they went to prison for,
Yeah.
and so we have to have ways to release it. Another thing that I love to do is I love to write.
Mhm.
I write poetry, and so it's an
So,
amazing way to express myself that storytelling doesn't do. I mean, there's a difference between telling your story and then writing it in a poetic form, and
something
you're
about
able
creative
to
expression.
yeah, and you're able to like use words in a different way because you're able to resonate and just like feel the poem and let it come out.
Mhm. Absolutely. I think creativity or creative expression is very important, especially when it comes to healing, you know. And it makes me think about, I know like maybe it was around World War One, they used to take what they call shell shock veterans and they'd have them weaving baskets, you know, hence the term basket case. But it was a simple creative process that helped people, I think, come closer to healing. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And so,
I mean, it's kind of just like how how calm we get, like, if we grab a coloring book and
yeah,
we grab crayons or
yeah,
colored pencils and just
yeah.
sit there. I mean, thinking back now, I mean, I helped myself heal a lot in that way because I made greeting cards when I was in prison. I didn't have family members sending me money, stuff like that. So I made greeting cards. Now, I wasn't the best artist. I'm putting that out there. My art was not the best, but I would write my own poetry,
Yeah.
and so people would come up and they'd tell me some stuff about their wife or whatever situation. I'd write a poem in 10, 15 minutes, like, "Hey, how's this?" I mean, I got to the point where doctors and nurses and COs were buying cards from me. So
Nice. Yo, I've met the most intelligent and creative people I've ever met in my life behind the wall. And I
hey, man,
stand 10 toes down on that. I've been on college campuses and other places where you have some really brilliant minds, but none have touched the people I've met behind the wall, you know? And so, David, we got a little less than maybe 10 minutes left. And I wanted to ask you to touch on two things. And one is, what role has your faith played in your healing and advocacy journey and just the work that you do? Because you speak a lot about your faith, but you don't do it directly, but anybody listening can hear it.
everywhere I go, I talk about my faith, and it is the foremost reason why I am where I am today. And
Mhm.
I have been able to achieve what I have. And it goes back to not, I mean, I'd say it all goes back to my childhood, and just the word being poured into me. Yes, I didn't believe like I do now,
Mhm.
but that word was planted in my heart,
Mhm.
and it just needed to wait until the right time, and the right time was that conversation with the detective,
Mhm.
and that just opened everything. And throughout my incarceration, my faith is what kept me going, what gave me hope. While I was incarcerated, my mom, dad, grandma, and sister all passed away. And it was that faith that helped me press through. It was that faith that led me to different scriptures during those times to give me the comfort. One of my favorite passages is 2 Corinthians 1, 3, and 4. It says, God is God of all comforts and tender mercies. We can comfort others, and he always comforted me during those times.
Mhm.
And then since I've been out, it's that faith and three churches that have loved on me. I've gone to three main churches since I've been out. All of them have accepted me, welcomed me, and just loved on me in powerful, amazing ways, And that's one thing that people getting out of prison have a fear about. It's like, if I go to this church and I tell them my story, are they gonna accept me? Are they gonna welcome me?
Right.
The church I go to now, which my wife and I and my son go to, we've almost been there a decade. I've been able to share my story in numerous ways, up on stage, podcasts, recordings, different things like that. And it's so incredible to be welcomed and not, oh wow, don't sit next to him because
Right.
where he went, right?
Right. Yeah.
And so, yeah, I mean, another thing too is I've spoken in 81 colleges and universities across the country.
Wow.
I've never had any school tell me I can't talk about God. I did have one school ask me like, "Hey, are you going to preach or are you going to talk about God?" I'm like, "I'm going to talk about God a little bit because, I'm not where I am today if I don't talk about God,
Right.
And some some comments I've gotten at times. I was at Auburn University and there was this girl that came up to me crying afterwards. And I was thinking that she was going to share about like being abused. And no, she's like, thank you for talking about your faith so much. It's like something I don't get to hear a lot when speakers come in or professors. And it
Mhm.
really impacted me. And I'm like, hey, that's
Right on.
great,
That's
and
dope.
it's so powerful, the platforms that we get and be able to talk in this way where we're not preaching, but
Right.
we're being a light with what we're seeing, and we're
Mhm.
talking about our faith, we're talking about what God's done, but you don't have to just, like, quote Bible verses 24/7 to
Right.
have that impact.
Just be a living testament. You know,
Yeah.
one of my favorite rappers, Talib Kweli, he says in one of his songs, he says, I come to speak to the dudes out of the side, outside of the reach of the church and the ministers, you know? So everybody needs to have that light. And one last thing, David, before we wrap it up, and that is how can people support your work and how can they contact you if they want to support your work?
Well, I'm on Facebook, I'm on Twitter, I'm all at David Lee Garlock, also LinkedIn. If they want to reach out to me as far as speaking engagement, they can go to my website, which is davidlgarlock.com. And those are really ways they can reach out. Definitely just follow on social media. You know, if something that I shared impacted you, definitely reach out. I always love connecting with people where I speak. I always leave my contact information. There's so many speakers that go in someplace and speak, and then that's all they want to do.
Right.
I'm not that way. You know, my thing is this, you know, I want to go in, I want to speak, but I also want to connect with these students outside of my speaking.
Let's build
And
community.
I have a I'd say I'm connected with a lot of different people across the country, and I always love to be that connector for these people. It's like if they want to do like law school, if they want to do interns, if they want to do this or that, I want to connect them to my network so they
Yeah.
can get those mentors, they can get those people that can pour into them
Yeah.
so they can be the best at whatever they want to do.
That's dope, man. That's dope. And I'm going to end it by just sharing this quick analogy, listening to what you've said. And that is, I think about the ants, you know, the red ants, the black ants, and all these other different type of ants. They're so small, but yet as a unit, they're so powerful because they're busy helping each other connect to resources. They're always working with each other. And I think as a group of humans, as a species, we can learn so much from other species, such as the ants, on how to empower each other. And yo, man, with that, I'm going to call it a wrap and say thank you for your time today.
Absolutely. I definitely appreciate being on, and I look forward to being able to share this with all of our people. And just what you're doing is incredible, and just continue to just give voice to this and allow formerly incarcerated people to share their story and to impact others.
Right on. Thank you so much, David. I'll be in touch with you, and I wish you the best as you keep doing your work and keep healing and shining the light wherever you go.
Absolutely. And you continue to do the same that you are, continue helping others heal.
All right. Right on, man. Thanks again. Have a great
Yeah.
day.
You too. Be
All right.
blessed.
Thanks. Peace. Hey, y'all. Thanks for hanging out with me for another episode of Prison to Promise podcast. If you or someone you know would like to share their prison to promise story on this platform, please hit me up at drcraigwaleed@gmail.com. I'll spell it for you. That's DrCraigWaleed@gmail.com. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share.